Well, folks, let's keep it real. Money for war, but can't feed the poor. Or should it be money for war, but they refuse to feed the poor, right? And that happened again this week as the House actually passed a $95 billion foreign aid bill. Now, this bill is for Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan as well. A lot of people have been livid about this and expressing their frustrations. But one of the things I think that really upset someone like Marjorie Taylor Greene is that Mike Johnson actually decided to bend the knee to what the Democrats wanted in the House and push this bill forward. Now, not everybody supported it, obviously, but I'm seeing some of the members of the Freedom Caucus not too happy with Mike Johnson choosing to have some type of bipartisanship with the Democratic Party. That is actually not why they chose him. This is the reason why they wanted to remove Kevin McCarthy, and you see Kevin McCarthy was removed, and now they see that Mike Johnson is also in there doing their bidding. Let's go ahead and get into this announcement from Mike, who seems to be pissing a lot of people off. Let's get into it.
I said these are not normal times. They're not. The world is destabilized, and it's a tinderbox. It's a dangerous time. Three of our primary adversaries, Russia and Iran and China, are working together, and they're being aggressors around the globe. And they're a global threat to our prosperity and our security. Their advance threatens the free world, and it demands American leadership. If we turn our backs right now, the consequences could be devastating. So this afternoon, the House acted, and we sent over to the Senate, and it will be transmitted shortly, our supplemental national security legislation. And make no mistake, this is not a blank check like the Senate supplemental bill was. This is very different. Instead of taking the path of least resistance and bringing up the Senate supplemental on the House floor, or just allowing a discharge petition to pursue, which would have had the same outcome, we gave our members a voice. We gave them a chance. We gave them a better process and ultimately a much better policy. Unlike the Senate's blank check, the House legislation has a number of very important features. It provides for greater accountability over Ukraine aid. It forces an endgame strategy for the Ukraine war. It includes a loan instrument of this foreign aid to Ukraine and the Repo Act to ensure that Russian assets pay for part of the bill. And unlike the Senate's bill, the loan system itself is a House innovation and allows for much needed insight. Now remember that 80% of the Ukraine funding will go to the replenishment of American weapons and stocks and our facilities and our operations.
Let's go ahead and pause here for just a second while he's on the subject of Ukraine. Notice he refers to this as a loan, right? Okay, a loan is something that has to be paid back. Who is supposed to pay this back? Do we expect Ukraine to pay this money back when their economy has basically crumbled? I don't think that is going to happen. What people have to understand is that this bill is basically a win for weapon contractors. The war in Ukraine is a win for weapons contractors. The war in Gaza is a win for weapon contractors. And this possible conflict between China and Taiwan, if something were to pop off, would be a win for weapon contractors. And sometimes what you will see happen is that NATO will actually instigate the conflict. Such is the case with Russia and Ukraine. NATO pushed this. They instigated this conflict. Again, a win for weapon contractors, not for the Ukrainian people, not for the Russian people. At the end of the day, it's not about the people. It's about these industries.
It also includes tough measures and sanctions on Iran and Russia and China, which most of the American people understand is a necessity and a very important thing. Our process in the end ensured that each member was able to consider the individual supplemental elements on their own merits, which is exactly how the House is supposed to work. I know there are critics of the legislation. I understand that. It is not a perfect piece of legislation. We're not ensured that in a time of divided government and in a time where there are lots of different opinions. But there is no question whatsoever that the House has made many strong improvements to the Senate bill, and the product that we've sent over there is much better. This package, I will note, because it's very important, also includes national security priorities, and many of them, but it is the only way that we could have gotten Democrats to support aid to Israel, and that's a fact. There is a lot of misinformation out there about the bill, and I just want to make one point about one issue that has been drawn a lot of attention, and that is, could any of this funding go to Hamas or to terrorist organizations or what have you? And we put safeguards in the legislation to ensure that UNRWA is not funded, the UN agency that included terrorists who participated in the October 7th attack on Israel.
Pause here for a second. So this is Mike Johnson repeating mainstream media talking points, repeating the military industrial complex talking points. That has already been debunked by CNN, actually. Even CNN actually investigated that and said, actually, Israel has not provided any evidence to prove that that is also true. Now, why would Mike Johnson do that? Well, you have to know that Mike Johnson also takes money from the Israeli lobby. This is not Mike Johnson pretending to act on his own accord. This is Mike Johnson, acting on the bidding of his donors. And that's what people have to know. If you follow Track AIPAC on Twitter, you'll see they're actually calling a lot of these politicians out that are taking money from AIPAC and other organizations that are part of the Israeli lobby.
We've also have language that prevents it from any of the funding going to Hamas or any other bad actors. That's a very important element of oversight. Congress takes the oversight very seriously, and we will continue to keep an eye on every dollar that we are using and investing at this time. I've said it very simply. I'll say it once again. It's an old military adage, but we would rather send bullets to the conflict overseas than our own boys, our troops. And I think this is an important moment, an important opportunity to make that decision. We allowed the House to do that, and I expect the Senate will make the same decision. One or two.
Pause for a second. So, more than likely, this is going to pass in the Senate. Now, let me mention something that Mike Johnson did not mention about this bill. This bill also includes the TikTok ban, or what we refer to as the TikTok ban. Notice that he mentioned national security. So one of the things that they've actually claimed about TikTok is that it actually is dangerous in reference to national security. I actually explained on this show before that it was actually the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League, that was behind the TikTok ban from the get-go. And that was due to leaked audio that we played on this show. So again, you have to know who these politicians are in bed with. Mike Johnson is in bed with the Israeli lobby. He is in bed with the military industrial complex. And that is why he is pushing these things through. That's why he was willing to go along with the Democratic Party to get this legislation through.
What is your message to those? You're being asked to resign. Will you?
Mr. Jeffries, about that, and do you plan to if it's brought?
No, listen, I as I've said many times, I don't walk around this building being worried about a motion to vacate. I have to do my job. We did. I've done here what I believe to be the right thing, and that is to allow the House to work its will. And as I've said, you do the right thing and you let the chips fall where they may.
A majority of
I will continue to do that.
In the world that you made a brave step, but at the same time, why it took too long for aid to Ukraine, and maybe too long? Why you decided to do it right now?
Listen, the House had a lot of important work to do here. We had to get the government funded in our appropriations process. We had to reauthorize the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. We had a lot of important measures that had to be done, and we got to this as quickly as we could. This is an important matter. I think it's timely. I think you've heard from leaders around the world, including in Ukraine, that this is being done on a timely basis, and the House had to have the time to deliberate and do this in the right manner. I think we did our work here, and I think history will judge it well.
Mr. Speaker, you're being asked to resign. You're being asked to resign. Will you?
Hey, everyone.
All right. So he walked away the reporter's question about the fact that he is being asked to resign. That push has come from Marjorie Taylor Greene, who's probably been one of the most vocal members of the Freedom Caucus. Now, you have to remember they agreed that Mike Johnson would be the right path forward. This was after Kevin McCarthy was ousted as speaker. They believed that Mike Johnson would do the right thing, or do what they felt was best for the Republican Party, which is obviously not to send more funding to Ukraine, stop sending we say tax dollars, but they're actually federal dollars to these wars abroad. However, that changes when you bring up the country Israel, because even Marjorie Taylor Greene supports the U.S. sending money to Israel. And this is a big big hypocritical statement when it comes from her. And it's not just her, it's Marjorie Taylor Greene, it's people like Tulsi Gabbard, a lot of these politicians that have been very vocal, and former politicians very vocal about don't send the money to Ukraine. Don't send tax dollars abroad to Ukraine. Again, I would say federal dollars. But at the same time, when you change the country to Israel, they will tell you we need to give Israel everything that it needs. And that's because a lot of those politicians are in bed with the Israeli lobby, not the Ukraine lobby, right? So they could be a little bit more vocal against that. So Marjorie Taylor Greene was not happy that this bill passed. And then also another thing that she has been pushing for is for Mike Johnson to also vacate the speakership. She wants Mike Johnson to step down and to push forth someone else. I don't know if that's going to work out this time around because we did see that she did not bring that motion forward. And that's probably because she didn't have enough allies to back her on that decision this time around. But that doesn't mean it isn't going to happen later on. Let's check out what she had to say about this.
We saw what happened with this vote. We saw your amendment go down. We saw all your frustration with Mike Johnson. So is today the day you're going to call for the vote seeking his ouster?
I'm actually going to let my colleagues go home and hear from their constituents because I think people have been too obsessed with voting for foreign wars and the murder industry here in America to actually understand how angry Americans are. When you have the strongest, loudest voices in the Republican movement and grassroots, furious, calling for Mike Johnson to be vacated. The people here, my colleagues, have not heard the message. So I'm looking forward for them to go home and hearing from the folks back at home. But this is the sellout of America today. We had members of Congress in there waving the Ukrainian flag on the United States House of Representatives floor.
Let's chime in here for a second. Now, that is a problem, right? That you had representatives there waving the Ukrainian flag. You were supposed to be America first, or you're supposed to look out for the people in this country first. However, that being said, when you had politicians have a Palestinian flag outside their office, that was also frowned upon by those who support the state of Israel, especially those that have dual citizenship with Israel. So we have to think about, again, the hypocrisy, right? So this is the first time I heard someone call out the fact that there were representatives waving the Ukrainian flag on the floor, because most of the criticism in reference to flags has been for those who are actually holding like a Palestinian flag, which predominantly applies to Rashida Tlaib. But at the same time, people are allowed to wave Israel flag. So Marjorie Taylor Greene, even in herself, she exposes who she is as well, because has a problem with them waving the Ukrainian flag, but she doesn't have a problem with them waving the Israeli flag. So always pay attention to that, folks.
While we're doing nothing to secure our border, I think every American in this country should be furious. Who's going to vote for these people? How can you vote for these people? They don't serve our country.
Republicans deserve
to call a vote on a motion to vacate eventually.
I don't think you were listening very well.
No, you said you wait for your constituents, but will you ever call for a vote?
But I mean, given what you said, do Republicans deserve to be in the majority?
That's up to the people, because this is the third betrayal by Mike Johnson. He delivered a two-part omnibus, funded the Department of Justice, 91 federal indictments against President Trump, funded the FBI that raided Mar-a-Lago, gave him a brand new FBI building, funded Joe Biden's open border policies that are killing Americans every single day. Then he reauthorized FISA that spied on American citizens, spied on President Trump's campaign, and he voted against the warrant requirement, the same warrant requirement that he was for 6 months ago. And then he did this bullshit in here on the House floor, foreign war package that does nothing for America.
So it is very obvious to me that MTG has been keeping receipts on Mike Johnson. She listed off about like 5 or 6 things that he's done legislatively. So she's been keeping tabs on him. She's letting Mike Johnson know, I've been taking notes about you. And, this is the same thing that actually members of the squad should have been doing in reference to Joe Biden, in reference to Nancy Pelosi, in reference to Hakeem Jeffries right now. This is the same thing that they should be doing. However, you notice when they are interviewed, they are supporting Hakeem Jeffries. They're supporting Joe Biden. AOC just took a picture with Joe Biden and Ed Markey, And they're just like chilling, like they're buds and bros and pals. I mean, it just, so they're not willing to be vocal against their Democrat counterparts when they are doing something wrong. Instead, they actually come onto the news and they kiss up to them and they defend them. Marjorie Taylor Greene, the behavior that she is exhibiting right now, this is what we expected from members of the squad. Apparently, Marjorie Taylor Greene is not afraid of her peers in the Republican Party, and it is very apparent that the squad members are. Right? She's not afraid of Republican Party leadership. AOC and the rest of the squad are afraid of Democrat leadership. So Marjorie Taylor Greene, to me, it seems like she doesn't really care if she continues to have a political career or not. Am I mistaken? AOC was the one that said she doesn't mind if she's a one-term congressperson, but it seems like Marjorie Taylor Greene is the person who really doesn't mind if she's a one-term congressperson. And I'm pretty sure the people in Marjorie Taylor Greene's district are actually happy with what she is saying and happy with what she is doing. So she's actually listening to her constituents, whereas members of the squad are not so much.
It's unbelievable. I'm thankful that America gets to see who this man is. I'm thankful that America gets to see who the people that voted for this is, because this is the only way it's going to change. People have to see the truth.
Why is this fight against Russia not worth it?
Based on what you just said, are you waiting to see if there will be more support in your conference before calling a motion to vacate?
There is more support. It's growing. I've said from the beginning, I'm going to be responsible with this. I support my majority. I support the majority next time. I do not support Mike Johnson. He's already a lame duck. If we had the vote today in our conference, he would not be speaker today. He's already a lame duck. He can't raise money. Everyone knows it. We know we can't win the majority next year without raising money. He can't be speaker. He doesn't have the vote. This is the process that just has to happen.
Are you going to talk to Doug?
I thought it was pretty funny that she called out the fact that he can't raise money. Oh, no.
Are you going to raise this with Donald Trump?
What are you waiting for to drop this motion? This was the last big legislative push before September, something that you have been against for months now. What are you waiting for on triggering this motion?
There's some people that are rash and irresponsible and do things like what happened last time. I'm not that person. I didn't come here to Congress to actually hurt our institution, hurt our majority. I'm handling this the right way, and so I'm allowing the process to happen. The American people are going to have their way. Our voters are going to make their voices heard to my colleagues in the party. And like I said, the vote was held today. Mike Johnson is a lame duck.
Are you going to bring
He's done. He's done.
Are you going to talk to Trump about this? Are you going to bring this to Trump? Are you going to bring it up to Trump?
President Trump watches the news. I'm sure he knows what's going on.
He says
the policy of Ukraine aid, Congressman. Do you think President Trump could have been clear? He was not very clear about this bill regarding Ukraine aid.
Please stop.
Please stop.
Could you chill out?
Why this fight against Russia isn't worth it?
Do you think President Trump could have been clear about Ukraine aid?
Okay, I'm sure you're still with me, Fred.
So because of the statements that MTG has been making, guess what, guys? The same way a lot of us were called Putin puppets and we were called like Russian, like propagandists, they are now calling, the press is now calling MTG the same thing. And I'm talking about even the conservative press. They're calling her a Putin puppet, Moscow, Marjorie. Like, it's wild, man. It's wild and crazy. We'll finish up a little bit more here.
So that was, yeah. So look, I mean, there are a couple of takeaways from this. And Eddie, if we want to move over this way a little bit so we can reposition ourselves, get out of the melee. This was one thing now we just learned. She's not moving forward with the motion to vacate today. That was important. That means that Mike Johnson's job, which we've been reporting, has been on the line because she has been leading the charge to try to oust him. She's not going to go ahead with this today. They're going back home for a week-long recess. She believes that Republican voters will come out.
I'm going to interrupt you because now let's listen to House Speaker Johnson.
World, as we all know, and we saw.
So we already heard that part there. So guess who is really happy about this? Obvious, BB is happy about this. Taiwan is happy about this, although we don't hear as much from them in more present days. But of course, Mr. Give me some more money. Zelenskyy himself is very happy about this. He actually issued a response after the bill passed in the House. Here he is thanking you for all the money. Now, this is a part of Meet the Press on Sunday.
The United States will stay with Ukraine, will protect the Ukrainians, and they will they'll protect democracy in the world. This is the show of leadership and strength of the United States. And I think, indeed, now we've reached this important moment. For half a year we've been waiting, and I would like to say thanks to all the team on my side and on the US side, the team who did everything so that we would get this positive vote. And today we definitely need this aid. And Kristen, you know, we really need to get this to the final point. We need to get it approved by the Senate, and then we want to, well, get things as fast as possible so that we get some tangible assistance for the soldiers on the front line as soon as possible, not in another 6 months, so that they would be able to move ahead.
Let me pause here for just a second and let me just chime in. So more billions of dollars going to Ukraine. You guys, we called this from day one that there was no way Ukraine would be able to beat Russia. I don't know how much money we've given them now, but at one point, I think we exceeded 100 billion last time I had checked, but we're continuing to give them money. And my whole thing is, at this point in time, somebody is going to have to like really put their foot on the ground and call this out and call it out for what it really is. And I mean, it's going to have to be more politicians in the House calling this out, besides Marjorie Taylor Greene, besides certain members of the squad. More people have to be more vocal, because the thing is this: all that money that we gave Ukraine, we could have used that money and that aid to actually fix problems here for Americans in this country. We have increase in homelessness in this country. We have a healthcare crisis in this country, right? We have a sickness crisis in this country. We have educational issues in this country. We have infrastructure problems in this country. And that money should have been invested in America. That money should have been invested for us, not for a country that is losing this war, will continue to lose this war, and then going forward is going to have an economy that is going to collapse. Are we supposed to help them with that too? And why is all the money and resources coming from the United States? Why aren't any of these other countries helping out Ukraine? Oh, that's right. Some of them decided to stop doing that because they realized they had to take care of their people first. Everybody comes to, we are not a bank. This country is not a piggy bank that you can just dip your hand into as much as you need it. And that is exactly what Zelenskyy has been doing. Do you know there have been reports made that some of the money and aid that has gone to Ukraine has not even been used towards the war? There are people in Ukraine out there buying yachts. Where's this money going? And the Pentagon, they couldn't even pass a freaking audit to show us where this money has been going. So Mike Johnson says that with this new bill, we're going to have more accountability in reference to where the money is going for Ukraine and how the money has been spent. Problem that I have is, we didn't have this all along, or do we have it all along and they've been hiding things? What a mess, man.
You said this week, President Zelenskyy, that Ukraine would have no chance of winning without more U.S. support. And I guess the question is, can Ukraine now win this war, or is the United States merely giving you enough aid to prolong this war?
Thank you. I think this support will really strengthen the armed forces of Ukraine, and we will have a chance for victory if Ukraine really gets the weapon system, which we need so much. The thousands of soldiers need so much. And this aid should not be just spread in thin layer all over, but it has to end up in tangible weapon systems, some really crucial weapon system which are hard to get, the long-range artillery. And I really appreciate that it mentions ATACMS, so long-range weapons, and it's important because we
So they're not going to win. And we've been saying this for quite some time. They're not going to win. And then what happens when this money and aid runs out? Everyone remember this. Remember this statement here on Meet the Press broadcast. It was April 21st. Remember what he's saying here, because this money and this aid is eventually going to run out too. And next thing you know, he'll be back in DC, knocking on the door of the White House, asking for more money. We are not a bank. And I really think the American people, we ought to have some type of a say in reference to how the federal dollars are spent and how our tax dollars are spent. We have no say so. These representatives that we vote for to represent us, represent the military industrial complex, and they represent the state of Israel. They're doing more for Ukraine than they're doing for us. And people have to see this for what this is. We'll play a little bit more here.
We need long-range weapons to not lose people on the front line, because we have casualties, because we cannot reach that far. Our weapons are not that long range, so we need it, and air defense. This is crucial. These are the priorities now.
President Zelenskyy, as you know, this aid was held up for half a year because there is fierce opposition to sending more aid to Ukraine, particularly amongst some Republicans. How long should Americans be expected to fund the war in Ukraine?
The Americans are not funding the war in Ukraine. They first and foremost protect freedom and democracy all over Europe. And Ukraine is fighting, and Ukraine is sending its best sons and daughters to the front line, and it reduces the price for all Europe, for all NATO. It reduces the price for everyone, including the US as the leaders in the NATO. US army now does not have to fight protecting NATO countries. Ukrainians are doing that. And it's only the ammo that the civilized world is providing. And I think it's a good decision. That is why we do need to keep supporting. While Ukraine stands, there's no direct war between US or NATO and Russian aggression. So Ukraine is still fighting, and Ukraine is protecting all.
The gaslighting, the amount of gaslighting that is coming from Zelenskyy is quite appalling. Also, all of a sudden, he doesn't speak English. I've had enough with it. I really have. And for him to sit here and say, oh, well, it's not coming from it's not coming from the American people. You have to keep supporting. We don't have to do anything. And I'm willing to bet if you were to allow the American people to vote in reference to this and send more money to Ukraine, you probably wouldn't get any more funding, Zelenskyy. You probably wouldn't get any more funding. One more question from her here. I think this is important.
The others.
President Zelenskyy, can you give Americans a sense of the timeline? Will you still need as much aid this time next year? Or do you think you can turn the corner on Russia? What's the timeline?
Well, it depends on when we actually get weapons on the ground, as you said it, Christian. If we get it in half a year, well, we've had the process stalled for half a year, and we had losses in several directions. The losses in men, in equipment. In the East, it was very difficult. And we did lose the initiative there. Now, we have all the chance to stabilize the situation and to overtake the initiative. And that's why we need to actually have the weapon systems. When we get it, when we have it in our arms, then we do have the chance to take this initiative and to move ahead and to protect Ukraine. But giving you a specific timeline of the war, Well, it depends on like how soon we get this aid. There are so many variables, so many factors, and sometimes when we protect the important line, you retreat because you don't have enough forces and equipment, and then retaking that line would take 2 or 3 times more. I'm not saying that this is how it's going to end up, but things are possible. And I can give you an example with F-16.
We're not getting into F-16. Beautiful Rose says, Ritter said Ukraine lost. Zelenskyy is going to take money and leave Ukraine. 100%. I'm sorry, but we got to call it out for what it is here. Actually, I'm not sorry. We have to call it out for what it is here. He's not willing to give her a timeline because they have already lost. There is no Ukraine coming back and winning this war. That's why he's not giving her a timeline. And I would question where this money is actually going to go, because I don't trust that it's going to go in the places that it's supposed to. So that's my take on that. He can't give you a timeline because they have already lost. And there are also people that have been around Zelenskyy that have given the same statement to Time magazine. They said this a couple months ago. They said, everyone realizes here that we have already lost except for him. And he's the one that's still asking for money. $94 billion out the door. Part towards Ukraine, Israel, Taiwan, and don't forget that legislation also includes that TikTok ban. Now, you see how these Congress members can come together over the weekend and rush and push through legislation to help out another country. But when it comes to them rushing to do something for the American people, they couldn't even rush to try to vote on a $15 minimum wage. And when they finally did get around to doing it, they voted against it. Now, you don't have to be Republican or Democrat to see the writing on the wall that when it comes to the American people, we are at the bottom of the list. They'll do anything for these companies that the military industrial complex tells them to support and help to continue to fund these wars. That's where the money is going. What a mess.